Friday, right? Yes, Friday. Well, happy Friday the 13th. I just wanted to let each and every one of you be introduced to my beautiful, beautiful, beautiful husband. Um, he saw the live that I did with Pastor Michael Neely yesterday, and he wanted to give a perspective, more of a African-centered perspective on what happens when a child has been, sorry, y'all, this is the ADHD thing in me, this little curl. A child has been violated, and that the crime was committed against God. But first and foremost, before we get started, I just want to say welcome to Water to Spirit. I am the CEO, I am the founder, and remember, healing is revolutionary. And if no one told you today, you are special, strong, and you did nothing wrong. So y'all are free to ask questions. Again, as I state in every live, this is a safe haven. Water to Spirit is a safe haven. I don't mind questions that are respectful. I don't mind comments or statements. However, when it comes time to understand boundaries, you will be redirected once. If not, you will then go right back. You will be asked to leave or you'll be blocked. Before we actually get started, um, I would like for my hubby, Reverend Dr. Nikitah Okembe-Ra Imani, to introduce himself, his academic background, his spiritual workings, as well as people come in. Go ahead.
All right. Hello. Thanks for having me back again. My beautiful wife, Reverend Dr. Nikitah Okembe-Ra, as she said, I'm the president and CEO of Faith Forward, which is kind of an Africa-centered spiritual and cultural organization. We do a wide variety of things from consulting to music to art to other things to try to promote the culture and promote God in the process and righteousness. At the same time, I am a professor of Black Studies and have been in academia for the better part of 30 years with degrees in international affairs, sociology, and political science. So that's me, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Sorry. Can you tell us a little bit about your spiritual background?
I am a ordained minister, Protestant Christian minister, originally a Baptist, and then moved into AME. I have served as a pastor, as an assistant pastor, as a pastor in training in different positions. Ultimately, deciding that God wanted me to do ministry, and a lot of my ministry is ministry for those in need. Ministry at prison was a major focus of mine. Ministry on the street corner, ministry to those who were homeless or hungry, and so I focused more on the grassroots, everyday ministry that I think Christ was focused on, rather than running church organizations. Because sometimes I find church organizations kind of take you away from the practical application of the faith. Although I highly respect those who do that, they have their own role to play.
Can you talk a little bit about your role in going into the prisons?
Well, my original march into prison ministry was the fact that there are some little known facts about prison. Well, first of all, coming from a community of African descent, a large percentage, not a large number, but a large percentage of those who are incarcerated come from our community. And the largest percentage of those people are going to come back to our community. I mean, we have this notion you go to prison, you never come back. The truth is, the overwhelming majority are going to come back. And how they come back, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, is going to affect the community, right, and their families and everything that's going on. So I decided very early on that it was very important that they get spiritual development inside the walls so that they could come out with some spiritual perspective. Some of us know that organizations like the Nation of Islam and others really made a focus at reaching out to people inside prisons. But unfortunately, a lot of Christian ministries don't do as much, and so they don't get kind of a Christian orientation or Protestant orientation. And so I tried to go in, and I did everything from from baptizing to praying to reading, doing Bible study, to teaching biblical lessons, to going through biblical plays and all kinds of stuff. And so I made my ministry within prison, trying to help them on a spiritual level deal with the circumstances that led them to be there, with the hope that they'd never go back and that they'd live a good spiritual life when they came out. And so and then I got into prison education when I got into academia. So I teach courses at prisons, and have done that pretty much in every state or everywhere I was, to try to reach out, because I also think it's important that as they develop their spirit, they also develop their mind. So that's a big commitment for me, prisons, and just in general, people that kind of get lost by the wayside in ministry. I mean, on Sunday morning, the people in the church, I like to think of a church as a hospital. So the people in the morning are the ones who are at least well enough to get to church, but it's the ones that can't make it there, and that can be an economic reason, it can be an addiction reason, it can be a prison reason, it can be something else. Those are the ones I'm really concerned about, because as God said, the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few.
All right, someone said hi from India. And someone just people are saying hi again. If you are new here, this is a safe haven. Negative comments you will be asked to leave. You are free to ask questions regarding the topic of discussion. Today we are discussing um, how the violation of a child is a violation against God. Dr. Nikitah Okembe-Ra Imani, Reverend Dr. Nikitah Okembe-Ra Imani is our guest. And hello from Nicaragua. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Hi from Germany. Dr. Imani, if you can put your camera onto something so people can see your face directly, please.
Okay, you're saying they can't see me? I don't know
Well,
what you're
it's
saying.
just up your nose.
Okay,
This
so
is
let me.
also my husband, so I don't treat all guests
Yeah,
like
she.
this. This
Okay,
is
is
my
this
husband as
this
well.
better? Is this
Yeah,
better?
yeah,
Your
just
end?
literally put it in your yeah, there
That
we
better?
go. Yeah, and there's a
Okay.
glare, so you might wanna take your glasses off too, because there's like a
Okay. Got it.
uh,
Okay, is this better?
yeah, yes. Can you rest it on your desk as it's looking
It
directly?
won't. It probably isn't gonna stay stationary, but we can give it a try. Is this
All
okay?
right, perfect. Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Something like that, perfect. All right, so my first question is, when get a password, again, um, we're just gonna go ahead and remove that comment. Hello, everyone. Again, thanks for coming in. All right, Reverend Dr. Nikitah Imani, if you can talk a little bit about when a child has been assaulted. Wait, so someone said, "Have you heard?" Okay, wait until we ask questions. I will ask if there are any questions. In the meantime, you guys like and subscribe. Okay, Dr. Imani, here's my first question for you. What happens when a child has been sexually assaulted to them spiritually, and what are those spiritual consequences of the person who
Um,
committed the crime?
well, the spirit and the body are connected. The body is a temple, the container for the spirit. And so when the body is violated, we know that there's obviously the immediate physical effects. There's the mental effect of having your safety and your protection violated, and the same thing happens in terms of the spirit. The energy of the spirit is, I like to use the term fragmented. It's torn apart in the same way that your sense of the world, your sense of being, your sense of safety is torn apart by violations. In the same way, your spirit, your spiritual energy is torn apart, is fragmented, and you spend a lot of time, whoever it is, whether it's a child or an adult, but even more so for a child because they're developing, they're going to have to spend a lot of time in a sense, putting the pieces back together on the spiritual level, putting their spiritual energy back together. Believing in themselves, feeling protected, feeling strong, feeling wise, feeling brave, feeling that they have value, and all these kinds of things. All of their spiritual orientations towards themselves are disrupted when they've been violated by anyone in any way, and of course, being violated in that kind of intimate way is even worse.
What happened? Someone asked, have you heard of the missing kid that was found dead in Leon, Nicaragua? That is a no for me.
I have not heard the latest, but I am aware of lots of cases in lots of countries and lots of places. So I'm deeply sympathetic, and allow me to offer my deepest condolences and concerns for those who are affected by the loss of a child. For those of you who do not know, I also lost my own son. He was a victim of gun violence here in the United States, and so I'm deeply sympathetic to parents who lose children or who have children who are hurt in any way, shape, or form. And I will be praying and hoping that I can send them good spiritual energies and provide any other assistance that God allows me to provide.
What happens? Why do you feel that the violation, when a child has been violated, why do you feel that the violation happened to God?
Okay. Well, first of all, the body, in our belief, belongs to God. We are created as physical beings as well as spiritual beings. And so God creates that temple and then creates the spirit that goes inside that temple. And so when you violate that, I mean, if you think of a temple as a real building, think of your church, your synagogue, your cathedral, your mosque, whatever it is, wherever you go to worship, that's a sacred place, and it's sacred because God and the worship of God and the respect for God and rituals associated with that are going to occur in that place. And so you wouldn't bring dirt in that place. You wouldn't bring corruption. You wouldn't bring something negative consciously into that place. And you would teach other people to hold that place holy and sacred. And so the body is the same way. And so then the spirit is sacred. And then when the body is violated, then the same effect occurs. You're bringing dirt and corruption and negativity into this sacred temple that God has created. And there's nothing more sacred than the womb from which life itself comes. And the idea that something affects the womb or affects the processes associated with the creation and bringing forth of a new spiritual life, that is the worst kind of crime. So it's clearly a crime against the person, right? That they are actually violated, but it's also a crime against the one to whom the body and the spirit belongs and for whom it's consecrated. And you can call that God, the source, however you conceive of your value. But we all know that that's a precious and sacred thing. And when it's violated, it is a violation of the person as well as of God.
You are my husband. You are fully aware of my child sexual assault throughout my childhood and the trafficking that I experienced. And again, when I was a teenager, I was sexually assaulted. Do you remember the beginning stages where I was in my therapy, like real therapy, and I would tell you, like, I do feel dirty. I feel like I have to clean the lacerations and the ick from them off of me. Do you believe that that is something um, along the lines of what you are talking about in terms of that filth, that vermin who violates a child, that they're putting that onto the child?
Yeah, well, I mean, anytime you contact an individual, you could contact someone in a conversation. You can contact them by giving them a hug, connecting with them. In a sense, they're not just connecting their body with you, but they're connecting their energy. And it's really, really important. We know to stay around, to stay away from negative people and negative energies, right? Because they interfere with us. If you meet somebody who's disrespectful and unkind, you don't like that interaction. You don't feel good after that interaction, and if you're not careful, it can kind of stay with you and it can ruin your day and whatever else. Well, imagine an interaction where you are violently hurt. And so as a result of that, you're going to carry that hurt and you're going to carry that pain. And the next thing that happens is the mental process kicks in. Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen? What about myself? What about my state of being created this situation, especially as a child? Because children don't always understand. They don't understand all the macro and the large level stuff. So what they're attempting to understand everything that happens to them, good or bad. And in that process, they can begin to kind of internalize all of that negative energy about themselves, saying that not the person who did it to me, but I'm dirty, I'm unclean, I'm bad. And then, of course, the bad thing, the real bad thing is society, adults, people who should know better will often reinforce that by saying that somehow the victim is responsible for the evil that's been done to them. And so, if anything, especially at a child level, that just reinforces their pain. And they spend a lot of time, a lot of therapy, a lot of work that has to be done to have them see themselves again as they were, as a creation of God, as something that's good and positive and holy, instead of as the repository for the evil that someone else has done.
Why do you think this society is, as a sociologist, why do you believe that this society projects that it is the victim's responsibility and the victim's fault? Rather, if it's domestic violence, sexual assault, bullying, anything of that nature. And pause, we're going to pause real quick. Are there any questions so far? You are doing very well, Dr. Imani. I'm happy. I got a good man, y'all. All right, go ahead and answer the question, Dr. Imani.
Okay, so well, this is actually kind of simple. It's not a deep sociological theory. If I've done something wrong and I don't want to take responsibility, what am I going to do? I'm going to blame somebody else. I'll blame the system. I'll blame the sky. I'll blame the water. Anything else. And usually people who've been victimized have already been disadvantaged. They've already been exposed. They've already been, in many cases, the victim of stigma and negativity and whatever. So it's easy to just kind of drop it off and say, well, it's your fault. It's something you did. And that, as long as society embraces that, then it prevents us from having to look at the perpetrators and the predators. It prevents us from having to punish them, admit them, because many times the perpetrators are ministers, they are doctors, they are lawyers, they are married men, they're important people in the community, as we call them. And they're really monsters, but we don't want to admit that. So to deny having to deal with any of that responsibility, it's much easier to dump on the one who already has suffered, and that's the victim. So, it's easier to blame the poor for being poor rather than change the system that generates poverty. It's easier to blame the addict for being the addict and jail them and punish them rather than dealing with the system that doesn't involve poor people, that creates drug industries that exploit people. It's a lot easier for me to blame the person who's been the victim of violence and abuse than it is for me to deal with the potentially powerful important person that I need to hold responsible for doing this evil to them. It's always been easier to deflect from responsibility and truth to something less.
Why do you believe that this is, as a sociologist, why do you believe this is a psychopathic society and not a sociopathic society?
Well, I think certainly there can be elements of both, but I believe that this society teaches certain kinds of ideas about the body, about the human being, and so forth. This civilization teaches things that encourage us to think about people in a very materialistic way. And so then who you are becomes what happens to you materially. And so, for example, going back to my example with poverty, if you don't have any money, then you're a bad person because you don't have any money. And somehow your material economic circumstance is seen as your moral character. The same thing, if you're a victim of domestic violence or rape or whatever, somehow that gets inscribed on you like a scarlet letter, and that becomes your identity spiritually. But that is not your identity spiritually. And to teach people that is a psychopathic idea because it encourages those who have power, who have influence, to be able to take advantage of other people in all kinds of ways, and then to argue that the people that they inflicted this pain and suffering upon, they're the ones responsible. You need to blame them. They need to fix themselves. They got to do the work, as opposed to, to me, not bringing the harm and the injustice and the evil to them.
What do you think about when what do you think about victim okay, sorry about that. I thought there were is there any questions so far? Okay. What do you think about how victims of a heinous crime such as sexual assault or trafficking um, are treated when they speak out after being victimized?
Yeah, this society does a horrible job. As I said, there's a lot of blaming the victim. For example, in the case of rape, for a long time, everyone who studies this knows that we'll ask what was he or she wearing. Usually she, because disproportionately women, but it could be males can also be the victim of rape and are. But I want to point out, it doesn't matter what I'm wearing. It doesn't give you a license to violate or hurt me. We wouldn't ask that question for a murder, right? We wouldn't say, well, what was the murder victim wearing? We would be concerned about the fact that there's a murderer on the loose that needs to be punished and dealt with. But when it comes to rape and child molestation, we start asking questions about how old they are. We start asking questions about what were they wearing, who were they with, what kind of person they were or whatever, and all of that is a deflection from the crime, and so it makes many victims uh be unable to start the journey to survivorship because first of all many of them remain silent because they don't want to deal with that kind of feedback. A lot of times institutions that they're connected to, right, they're connected to a family, they're connected to a church, they're connected to a school, they're connected to, and all those institutions will say it's your fault, ignore it, or it's your or something else. They'll tell them, they'll move them towards discouraging them from confronting what happened to them publicly, and so you're supposed to say nothing. And so many do, and then so many who try to say something get that negative stigma. And so society does an absolutely horrible job at that, and I think that's on purpose because powerful people are largely responsible for a lot of what's going on, and they don't want to be held accountable, they don't want to be exposed, they want the image of them maintained. You're seeing that right now. The United States is dealing with, I mean, it's amazing that we're discussing this right now. We have this guy named Epstein who clearly was an elite with lots of money and lots of power, and clearly was doing these things with kids and women and other stuff. And we're being told that that's one person. It's just this one person all by himself. There was nobody else, and nobody believes that. Everybody kind of knows, but you can see that there's a tremendous pressure on the system right now to not go too far into that because it exposes the fact that the system as a whole doesn't do what it should do in terms of the protection of men, women, and children from violence, from molestation, and other things.
Um, Speaking from experience of being my husband, and even before you were my husband, you were in my life advocating for me. What was the biggest frustration you had of the system regarding me standing up and speaking out against the violations that happen to me?
There's so many moments, but I guess it's when you gave me the narrative of what had happened to you, which clearly was wrong. And the thing I tracked along the narrative was the number of people who could have intervened, and not just could have, but should have. In this country, we have what's called a mandatory reporter. There are
Everyone
certain
is.
people, right, and almost everyone in any position of authority in relation to a child, and sometimes even beyond the child stage.
Yes.
You have a responsibility to report violations to the police, to health authorities, to others. And your story, as you related it to me, and as I experienced it as time went forward, was that at a very young age you did something most people who had been victimized did not do, which is you told those authorities, and you communicated with law enforcement, and you communicated with teachers, and you communicated with counselors, and you communicated, and to watch all of those people just totally ignore what you said and not report and not do anything and not offer any help. Some even told you to accommodate yourself to this horrible circumstance that no child should have been in. That was the moment where it was just so frustrating for me, because I, as an educator, have had situations where I've had to report. As a minister, I've had situations where I've had to report as a mandatory reporter, would have done it anyway. Even if I wasn't a mandatory reporter, if I see someone being hurt or brutalized, I'm going to say something. I don't care what people think about me, or what they, I'm going to do what's right if I know what's right. But what stunned me was the number of people who had influence in society, in the community, in the church, in the school, who did nothing and watched you suffer. And in a sense, they did a kind of silencing of you, because at some point, if you're a child and you're telling all the people that are really important in your life what's going on, and you're waiting for them to intervene and you don't, one response is to maybe keep telling it, but a more common response is to feel like nobody's going to help me, nobody's going to believe me, nobody's going to do anything, so I'm just going to have to swallow this. And that sets up a potential lifetime of suffering and pain for somebody, when what we really need is adults to be adults, supposedly righteous people to be righteous people, and people to take responsibility, and for us to stop the predators and stop the conduct.
When What are your thoughts? And this is me. Okay, any questions so far? Someone's typing right now, but in the meantime, what are your thoughts about me now as someone who has gone through her, been through, and is healing? And though healing, ing, means ongoing, it will be for the rest of my life and the rest of the time that you are my husband in this lifetime and then in the next. How do you think that I am doing now as someone who was sexually assaulted throughout her childhood, trafficked throughout her childhood, and then sexually assaulted again as a teenager? As my husband, how do you see me doing right now?
I see you doing excellently, and you're doing the work, you're making the commitment, and it's difficult and trying at times, but you have always done it. You've always sought to heal. You've always sought to heal others and share your story for the benefit of others. So I'm very proud of you. I'm very confident that you're going to be powerful and influential in your own right in helping other people come out and share their stories and do what they're doing. I will say that there's one important element, and that is that there was a journey in which we found people who were willing to accept the truth. And along the way, in eventually we got therapists who were willing to accept the truth, physicians who were going to accept the truth, and people who are going to help you along to communicate your message. So it's a combination. It's all kind of aligned by God, that you did your personal healing, but then your personal healing has gotten connected to other people who could both assist you on that process and also help you help others. And I've been amazed by that process. I've been confirmed in terms of the power of God and the ancestral power to look out for the good, even when there's been a lot of negative. So you're very much an inspiration to me. And I say that I often say you're my heroine, and my hero, my heroine. And I don't mean that in a flippant way. And I'm not saying that because we happen to be married, but I'm saying that anyone who had your narrative in this society, with the obstacles that you face in this society for speaking to truth and justice, would often give up or fall into the crack somewhere. And your resilience and your spiritual commitment has is an inspiration to me through all the things I've had to go through, some of which before I met you, and then some of which I encountered today. But it is an inspiration. I think it's an inspiration to others. So I'm very proud of you, and this is an honorable position to be here.
Okay, I wasn't expecting all that.
Sorry.
Uh, Thank you for loving me, uh, throughout this journey, Imani. Thank you.
Oh, hey, it's a wonderful thing to love and to be loved. It really is. You're gonna be all right over there.
Yeah, you got me off guard. I wasn't,
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't trying to
thank you.
break up
No, I
break up
appreciate
the
it.
host
I
here.
appreciate it. Imma take the baton and Imma make sure, I am gonna be a force to be reckoned with if I'm not already. Uh,
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any questions so far? Okay, I think people are just, intrigued by you like I am.
Okay, that's
What,
what.
um, what what was your, as an advocate, first, can you describe what it is like being an advocate, um, not just for the community, but for someone who has experienced the things that I've experienced? What what does it mean to be an advocate, and what was your frustration as an advocate?
Um, well, I would say I guess it would be important. Like if somebody wanted to be an ally or an advocate and they came to me, how do I do this? I would tell them that this is a different kind of advocacy than other kinds. You know how you could advocate for, I don't know, for better schooling, right? You could be an advocate for that. You could go out and campaign and join organizations and do that. But there's always a distance that separates you, your spirit, and your stuff from that, right? That's something you do. This kind of advocacy, when you're advocating for people who've been the victim of domestic violence or rape or child molestation or whatever, you are not able to have that distance. You are going to feel their feelings. If you are truly an advocate, truly an ally, you haven't gone through what they've gone through, but you're going to live it. You're going to live through the therapy. You're going to live through whatever medical things are involved. You're going to live through the reliving and recounting of what it is that they've been through and whatever. And you have to be prepared for that. It's not the same as being the actual victim, but you yourself, in some sense, will feel victimized because you're going to watch someone you love and care about go through that whole process and all that struggle. And you're going to be there with them. And the whole time you're thinking, if I could just get my hands on the people who created this, or if I could just get my hands on the people who could have prevented it or intervened who didn't, then the person I love would never have gone through this and we would not be going through this now. So it's a different kind of scenario when you become an ally to a person who's been victimized in that way. I've always been an advocate for a lot of social causes and stuff, but I was always able to go home, turn the lights out, and say, "Okay, I'll do that again tomorrow." And there wasn't that taxing kind of sensation that you get when you're the person you care about, whether it's a friend or someone more intimate than a friend or your child or whatever, and when they're in the middle of it and you're watching their pain and whatever, you've got the level that's kind of an intellectual level that you still have, but then you have that personal level where your heart, your mind, your spirit is tied up into that, and that's a real tough thing to go through because their disappointments are your disappointments, their successes are your success. You start living with them. It's kind of like I had a corrections officer say one time, and he was a positive correctional officer. He didn't look at everybody as bad people, but he felt sorry and he very much empathized with the people that he was working with. And he was talking about how there were jobs where he would come home and then he would leave the job at the job and he'd come home and do something else. But he said, ever since I've been working with these especially young people who are incarcerated, and a lot of them have backgrounds like me and whatever, I feel like I can't do that. Somehow I feel like I'm in prison with them, and I want to free them because I need to be freed. Somehow our fate is tied together. I think the same thing happens when you see someone who's been a victim of this kind of thing. If you truly have love and you truly have sympathy and empathy and passion about this, you're riding with them to the end, and you want to see them heal, and you want to see those who hurt them punished, and you want to see that on a personal level. And if you're not ready really to make that personal investment, then you're not going to be an effective ally, because I can tell you this is not the kind of allyship where you go home and you just forget it. It is not that kind of thing. So there's a much greater personal investment involved in being an ally to people who have been or are being the victims of this kind of intimate personal violence.
Well, would you describe what it was like for me finding the right therapist and recognizing that the therapist who were wanting to be my therapist needed therapy? Would you like to talk about the time that you and I both were yelled at in a therapy session because the therapist? I'll give a backstory. I am doing EMDR therapy and at Lutheran Family Services at the time, and a therapist who had the messianic complex, which means a godlike complex, as in, I'm going to come in, I'm going to save you, I'm going to heal you, you're going to go on about your life, and I get to, but see, for me, it's different. I ask questions, I advocate for myself. She wanted me to read a book by Viktor Frankl, which was a Jewish Holocaust survivor. I asked her, I said, well, do you have any books on any indigenous or African American women who've experienced what I've experienced that I can read instead of Viktor Frankl, who speaks about surviving the Holocaust? She said, no, that's not important. I disagreed. I need to know that there are people who look like me in this society who've experienced things like me, and this is society to recognize that I am not an anomaly, right? I'm struggling with that word today. You still caught me off guard, babe. And that frustrated her that I asked questions. She thought doing 12 sessions was going to heal me, and my trauma is complex. So one day, my husband came into a therapy session and she showed her true feelings. Go ahead, babe. I mean, Dr. Imani, tell him what
Well,
happened.
I mean, I guess for me, let me back up a little bit. I'm more concerned about the general question you raised, which is that we talk about things this society doesn't do well. We don't do psych well. We don't do counseling well.
No.
It's not generally available. It's extremely expensive. It's hard to find. It's stigmatized quite often. You don't want to go get any kind of mental health assistance at all because you're considered crazy. And some of our institutions will stigmatize people who go to them. So you got that problem. Then you got another problem, which is that we don't train for cultural relevance. In fact, we have an administration right now moving as far away from that as possible. So it means that you're cranking out people who have expertise in the field, but often know nothing about the actual lived experience of the people they're trying to serve. And so then they come up with sources and techniques and other things that don't relate to the lived experience of the real people they're trying to serve because they haven't been educated and led to believe that. And then
Or want to
last but
be.
not and then last but not least, that messianic complex you're talking about, that's something that I talk about a lot. Eurocentrism, this idea that that you're going to fix people. You have doctors who, I'm going to fix you. You have folks who are going to fix you. But so much of what psychology really is me having a conversation and the therapist participating in that conversation, and I'm connecting with my ancestors and God, and I'm doing that healing work, and I'm kind
Mhm.
of uncovering the layers within myself. I'm very much a part of that. So the model that someone external to me is just going to sit and have some 12-step program and do something, and magically that's going to heal me, is a very
Mhm.
Western idea, and it's very, very problematic. It is extremely problematic when you're dealing with either child molestation or domestic violence, anything else, because the first step for anyone who's been through that is someone hearing their truth. We talked about that earlier. If I am so steeped in off the wall theories and all this stuff I dragged in from the academy and I can't hear you, I'm not going to be effective, and especially with people, because so often the first encounter that a therapist is going to have with somebody who's been a victim of stuff like this is a encounter in which no one has ever listened to them, and maybe they've never even formulated the words to say what happened to them. And if the therapist can't get past that level because they have their own agenda, then they're not going to be able to work with you. And it took a long time. We ended up with a therapist who shared a spiritual perspective, who was willing to hear your story, and then the healing began. But a lot of the ones, including the one you're talking about, had dragged in some Eurocentric stuff they got from some school somewhere, and some theories and some formulas, and actually became frustrated that they weren't working, but they had no chance of working, because that's not the way you do psychology. In the Western world, psychology is about maybe the physical brain, but Africans use the word psi. Psi in the African context means spirit, and spirit and mind. And so the state of my spirit needs the healing, and it needs to be, that's going to
Mhm.
be connected to my mind. If you don't do anything with my spirit and you don't address that, then my mind will still be in some ways fragmented, and I'm not going to heal. And I just think Western psychology really needs a reboot.
I know that he doesn't wanna go into the story, but I will say this. Y'all, that bitch literally said, "You're too smart for your own good, Denisha." No, sweetie, you are intimidated by my intelligence because I ask questions. If something isn't making sense, if I know what I need, I also know that I may not know what this means or this means, but if I'm asking you questions as someone who's on the spectrum, it's not that I'm asking you questions because I say you are inferior to me. I'm asking you questions because I want to learn and I want to understand. All right. So, my frustration before I met this amazing therapist now is that asking questions to an individual with the messianic complex in a therapy session, that frustrated them. Like, who are you to ask me a question? I'm not your patient, I'm your client. That's one. Number two, who am I? I am a child of God, and I have every right as a human to ask questions. And they weaponize language in psychology as well. Uh, my Dr. Imani, who is also my husband, you teach medical humanities courses at the university. Would you like to discuss the weaponizing of words in mental health or in uh, healthcare as a whole? And can you define Eurocentrism? Can you define Eurocentrism? Does that mean white people?
Okay.
That was one of the questions.
Got you. Let me start with the Eurocentrism question. No, it doesn't mean people. It's not. That's that material thing that I think gets us in trouble. It's a philosophical system that was developed in the 13th and 14th century, and it became dominant. Europe brought that theory to the world, but just because you're a person of European descent doesn't mean you're Eurocentric. On the other hand, if you're not a person of European descent, you can be Eurocentric. It's a philosophy rooted in Plato and some other thinkers that basically makes everything in the world kind of a subject and an object. An object is a thing, and a subject has feelings and matters. And you start treating everything as an object. Everything other than you becomes an object. And that becomes a problem when you apply that to people, because you start treating people as object. People become things. You start ignoring their emotions, their spirituality, their cultural context, and that's what Eurocentrism brought to the world. And even where there are no individual European people, you will find that the global civilization, some of the most powerful aspects of global civilization, are very objectifying. And that leads to a lot of human harm, because if I'm going to ignore sympathy, empathy, feelings, God, ancestors. If science and rationality and all that stuff starts with me ignoring all of that, keep in mind that 70-80% of the human experience is all that stuff: the feelings, the emotions, the families, the connections. So if I'm going to throw all that away and I've got this object that I'm going to manipulate, and when we bring it into medicine, coming into the second part of the question, in medicine, those who learn this Eurocentric approach, you're the patient, and a patient is an object, right? And so I'm gonna, and like an object, like I'm gonna manipulate a table, I'm gonna manipulate you, and I'm gonna apply the formula to you. I'm gonna give you the standard medication, the standard treatment, whatever, and then I'm gonna assess the results and then see if you're healing. And then if you're not healing, that means you're resistant to therapy. It's kind of your fault, and all this kind of stuff. And that model of medicine, which is despiritualized and not really connected to the individual, and it's not an interrelationship, it's a one-way kind of top-down hierarchy. That is what leads to a lot of medical harm. I mean, you have doctors who don't even bother to ask you how you're feeling or what you think you might have or whatever, because they're supposed to know, and because they've got the white coats on. But nobody knows how my body feels more than me. I'm sorry, but doesn't matter how many degrees you have. You don't know. Now, you may have a language, as we said, going back to your thing on language, there may be a special language associated with medicine, usually some Latin terms that you have to apply. But I may not be able to speak Latin, right, like anybody else, but I can communicate what I'm feeling and what I'm and you're not going to be able to treat me at a mental or physical level unless you can hear me talk about not just my symptoms, but how I'm feeling, and also in terms of selecting therapy. What is it that I'm committed to doing? What is it that resonates with the way in which I'm treating myself? And bringing that all together is not something that the Western system of medicine does. And if you look at African American women, especially, one of the darkest stories in the Western world is the healthcare system in African American women. A lot of it starts with the fact that practitioners just don't listen to them. They simply ignore them. And so when the African woman says, "I'm in pain," it gets ignored. Or I'm suffering problems. They somehow designate it as some kind of gender thing. That's the object again, and they ignore the fact that it's connected to your personal experience, and they don't do anything. For a long time, for example, many mental health conditions were seen as male only. Women were seen as having
Like
female problems.
autism.
Yeah, women only had female problems, right? The common
Hysteria.
psychological thing was hysteria, which was connected to women's genitalia. And so women had female problems, men had real, mental health problems, neurosis and depression and bipolarism and whatever. So for a long time, women weren't diagnosed, they weren't treated, they weren't examined, and they weren't believed that they were experiencing all the things that men experience. We made some progress there, but we have not made as much progress in terms of the actual treatment regimen and other things. And sometimes the mental health challenges of women get ignored. Now imagine being ignored as a victim, and the victimization has caused you to have some mental health effects. And then you go to if you somehow get to a mental health structure and they're not listening to you either, it's almost like re-victimizing the person who was already victimized. I wasn't listened to about what happened to me physically in my pain.
Mhm.
Now I'm not even listened to about the effects of it.
Mhm.
And some people just, again, they'll just withdraw. They won't get the counseling or the mental health care or whatever they need. And again, they'll go to church or parents or family, and they'll say, "You don't want any mental health because we don't want anybody to think you're crazy and all this." And so it's another silencing mechanism. And the problem with this silencing is not only that we're not hearing what's going on, but it's the fact that some individual could end up dying or being sick and miserable for their entire lives, or even snapping and becoming violent or promiscuous or something else. There's all kinds of stuff that will happen if people don't get the care that they need. And we should be encouraging rather than discouraging care. We should see care as a moment of interaction. bi-directional interaction between the healthcare professional and the so-called patient, instead of a top-down thing where I'm going to wave a magic wand and solve all your problems. If it was that easy, they wouldn't exist.
Absolutely. All right, y'all, is there any questions? Dallas Stringer 7144 said, "Hello, Dr. Imani."
Hello, greetings. Thanks for being
Hello,
here.
hello. Yep, thanks for being here. Do you need a moment? Do you need to take a break, a quick break, Dr.
No, no, no.
Imani?
I just those who any of you that have allergies know that it's it's kind of that switch of seasons. You get those little allergies, so the nose gets a little active. So I just want to keep it presentable.
All right. I just have a couple more questions and then we can go right off. How's your charger doing? Charge on your phone, babe?
We are doing good. I'm going to check the numbers. We're at about 34% right now.
All right, so I'll do just a couple more questions. Um, First and foremost, I definitely just want to thank you, Imani, again for just the words you used. I'm not surprised that you said what you said because you say these things behind closed doors. You say these things to me, and it just feels good to know that my even with all of my trauma and things that I have been through, I have you to be there with me. And like I always say, I love learning from you, and I love teaching you. I love being taught by you, and you are the substance of a man of God, a man of authority, and a man of boundaries, um, and most importantly, a man of God. And I just want to thank you for loving me and being the safest place in the world for me. So when I go out and do battle, when I go out and do battle, go out in the world, at least I know when I come home, I don't have to have that shield. I can just be 100% protected without even having to just focus on everything outside in the outside world. So I want to thank you for being not just my biggest supporter, but my husband and just being the safest place in the world for me, Imani. I thank you. One of my questions is about forgiveness. If the child was violated and the body belongs to God, the violation happened to God. So is it the child's responsibility, even in adulthood, to forgive their predators?
I don't think it's the job of a child to try to do some kind of work to heal an adult who has done something wrong. And I don't think, in general, victims have the responsibility of focusing their energy, spiritual or otherwise, on those who victimize them. And I explain what I mean. I'm not saying, I'm not advocating for any kind of hate or dislike or whatever, because that's a negative energy. But my argument is that if you've been a victim of one of these traumatic events or multiple, your primary task really is healing and restoring yourself and being able to get a trajectory that works for you. The person who's the predator or the perpetrator, they've got to do work themselves. They obviously have issues. They have spiritual work to do to get themselves right and straighten out if that's what they want to do. But that's their assignment. I've never understood this model that it becomes the assignment, literally, whether it's spiritual or social, whatever, it becomes the job of the person who got shot to do some kind of resurrection or restoration of the person who shot them. I mean, the person who shot them should be doing that on their own. If they are not choosing to do that on their own, it won't work anyway, because as scripture says, each person must work out their own sanctification, right? So no matter what my mama does, no matter what my friend does, I'm not going to be saved or resurrected or restored based on somebody else's action. So no matter what someone says to me or does towards me, that's not going to save me. What's going to save me is me making a personal commitment to spiritual transformation. So it is the job of the predator and whatever they are to make that transformation, and I hope they make it. But this is not a task that can be imposed on the victim. And part of that logic is to throw something else on the victim. So now you're not only responsible for it happening to you, now you're responsible for the person who inflicted it on you. That's all rubbish, and it's all part of the scheme, the plot, the rhetoric that's designed to take the camera off the predator who's done the evil, done the sin, and needs to do the work, and put it instead on the poor, suffering victim. Here's one more thing you've got to do. And if you don't, and even worse, they'll say, if you don't do it, then that means you're a bad person. Wait a minute, let me get this straight. So you shot me, and then the focus of the discussion will not be that you shot me and that you were evil and sinful and corrupt and probably needed some mental health care or whatever you needed. We're not focusing there. We're on me. I'm still bleeding, right? If I'm not bleeding physically, I'm bleeding mentally or whatever. I'm still recovering, and I may have a lifetime of work. And then somebody's going to come to me and say, well, actually, you're not a very good person. And I say, why I'm not? Why am I not a good person? Well, because you haven't done all this extra work that you've been assigned to deal with the person who shot you. Let the person who shot me deal with themselves. They have enough work to do.
And that is one of the reasons why I always tell people it is not my job to forgive anyone but myself. If I have harmed myself in terms of not knowing why I was responding a specific way to a trauma, and maybe I have hurt myself, but it is not my job to forgive absolutely anybody. I believe you can still heal without forgiving individuals for what they did. You did what you did. I know you did what you did. Me personally, I'm going to share what you did. I'm going to tell what you did, and I'm going to be in your face about what you did. But that doesn't require me to have to forgive you. And I know my perspective may be a bit different from most people, but it's not my job to forgive my mother for failing. It's not my job for forgiving my father for failing. It is not my job for to forgive absolutely anyone walking this earth that has ever hurt me. Um, it is my job to do exactly what I am supposed to do to make sure that I am not like those who have. Would you
And
agree or disagree?
part of the issue, though, is that term forgive. The Western world misleads people about the meaning of that term. Forgive suggests that you're giving something to somebody else. You're obligated to give them, and that's where that logic comes from. But forgive is like forbear. It means I am choosing not to tie myself to what you did, to what you said, to what hurt me. If I don't forgive, then what happens is I'm still tied to it. I'm thinking about it. I'm putting energy. I'm focusing on it. I have to let that go. Forgiveness is the letting go. So you should always be forgiving, as in letting go and moving forward to what God, the ancestors, and stuff have for you. Forgiveness never meant that I'm supposed to go on some kind of campaign to go to someone who's hurt
Exactly.
me and do something and force them to say something. I don't know what that interaction is for. And that's not important, because nothing that a person has done to me or said about me defines who I am. Nothing about what they've done or what they said about me prevents me from attaining what God and my ancestors have for me. So, what I need to do is move on. What can happen to us sometimes is that we have something so traumatic that we tie ourselves to the situation. And I spent all my time thinking about what you did, what you said. Forgiveness means I'm cutting the chain, I'm breaking it off. I put you in God's hands, and I'm in God's hands, and I keep moving. I think unfortunately the Western church misleads people, and it has people sitting around next to people who hurt them some more.
I'll be
And
damned.
I just don't understand how anyone could say that
I
that
be
that's God's
damned.
will.
I be damned. So last question before we go. How am I doing with for his eyes got big, y'all. Before we get started, do y'all have a questions for him yet? How do you feel that I am doing as in my survivorship with forgiveness, reconciliation, and boundaries.
Okay, I think you're doing great in boundaries. You've brought some people into your life that reinforce you, that love you, that care about you, and you've moved some people out of your life that were toxic and destructive. So I think boundaries are, and you set boundaries on those relationships, really important. You've also, in terms of forgiving, again, being able to let yourself know that you're not dirty, that you're not bad, that you're not, as you say in your motto, you're special, strong, and did nothing wrong. And I think you've internalized that. You always said it for other people, but I think you've internalized that, and that has allowed you to move forward and with all of the various projects and things that you're doing. And I think reconciliation is a pragmatic kind of thing. I think you reconcile with those that you think are worthy of your reconciliation, and I think there are other things that, that cannot be reconciled by human beings, but must be reconciled on a higher level. There's, God, the ancestors. There has to be there's a reconciliation there. If you step on my foot, we can reconcile because it's just you stepping on my foot. But if you spend 40, 50 years of your life disrespecting me, mistreating me, or whatever, it's not a stepped on the foot issue. That's some issues that rise to the level of God, the ancestors, and whatever. And I'm not going to focus my energies on that. I'm going to focus my energies on trying to be the best human being I can be, to bring as much love and justice and truth into the world as I can. And I'm not going to wish you any ill. I'm just going to be like, well, I hope you get that worked out, because I kind of know what's going to happen if you don't, and I kind of know what will happen if you do, and it's your choice. And so I let people make that choice. But I'm not going to stand in the line of fire and just let you keep firing at me. One of the wisdom requires that when you fire at me the first time, next time I'm moving. I won't be there. You may still be firing, but you'll be firing by yourself because I'm gone.
So what you're saying is you are
A plus, A plus, A plus. The teacher gives you.
I I care about what he thinks. I care about what my bestie thinks as well. Everybody else, it just falls to the wayside. If you have not been in this journey with me, it's really nothing personal. It's just that they know my heart. And yesterday I was told that Christ wouldn't forgive me because I um, do not have biological family in my life, and that I am honest about who I love. Someone said, if your mom carried you for 9 months, it is your job to love her and honor her. And they had a sophomoric interpretation of scripture of honor thy mother and honor thy father. And I believe that that causes a lot of church hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. First of all, God doesn't honor sin. He doesn't honor corruption. He doesn't honor failure. He doesn't. There's no reading of scripture that makes that make sense. So, if my father's a thief and he robs people and hurts people, I'm not honoring that, and there's no obligation to honor that. In fact, if I start honoring that, I'm honoring sin, which means I pretty much left the theology. There's no point in doing anything else. What I'm going to honor is I'm going to honor life. I'm going to honor the fact that I came into life. I'm going to acknowledge a lot of honor. Honor in most cases means acknowledge. I acknowledge that a man and a woman participated in the process by which I came into life. I can acknowledge that, but honor is that's acknowledgement, but now honor and esteeming and going on with that relationship has to do with the character of that relationship. And if the character is corrupt or hurtful or disrespectful, God does not require that we stay. In fact, there's a line about departing in peace, is that I can depart in peace, which is okay, you're going to disrespect me. I'm not going to disrespect you. I'm not going to seek your harm, but I'm going to step away. I'm not going to be in your presence because you continue to disrespect me. We depart in peace. But you have all these ministers and religious institutions that teach people that God wants you to continue to be in an abusive marriage and relationship where your kids get brutalized, maybe even killed. God wants you to be molested and accept that and embrace your molester. God wants you to suffer, criminal violence and accept
That's
that.
not the God I
I
serve.
don't know that God, and that's
Me
not the
neither.
God I'm serving, and I wouldn't be interested in that one. The God I serve is about justice and what's right, and He believes in love and mercy and compassion. And people who are not doing that are not doing the work of God. And you can't con me into thinking somehow that God is engaging in doing evil and supporting those who do evil. That's not my conception of God. It's not the way I read Scripture. But I think that the sad part today is that many churches have become cover up centers for sin, and so the church has child molestation inside and has domestic violence, has all that evil stuff, and it doesn't want to admit it. It doesn't want to confess it. It doesn't want to come out and make it clean and punish those responsible. So it develops a theological rationale, just like those in slavery developed a theological rationale for making slavery look as though it was God's will and it was good. We have churches today that's saying, child molestation, yeah, that's okay. God's okay with that. He's okay with men or women beating each other. Oh yeah, he's fine with that. That's not God. That's during the Bible they even called it the synagogue of Satan. That's evil, and it's evil masquerading as a church. And I would say if you're in one of those places, get out of there, because that's not going to be the only problem. There's going to be a lot of problems in that place, and you're not going to receive any kind of spiritual guidance or upliftment if you're following that kind of theology.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Imani. Thank you, hubby. Oh my goodness. Just so loving. I love loving you, brother. All right. Those who haven't been told, you're special, strong, and you did nothing wrong. And remember, healing is revolutionary. Like and subscribe to the channel. And thank you for supporting. All right. Thank you, Doc.